Peace, family. This is the Drapetomaniac Podcast, and I'm Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, that is the head Drapetomaniac in charge. And we're here to have conversations on how to get off this plantation. Juneteenth is fast approaching, and there's no shortage of commemorations, talks, speeches, and celebrations in the works as we speak. What is Juneteenth all about, and why do we celebrate it? As an abbreviated history from Wikipedia, Juneteenth, also known as Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, and Self-Liberation Day, is an American holiday celebrated on June 19th.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that you listeners are listening to the Drapetomaniac Podcast on doayamedia.com. You are, right?
It memorializes June 19th, 1865, when Union General Gordon Granger read orders in Galveston, Texas, that all previously enslaved people in Texas were free. That's it in a nutshell. Now, before I go into it, I'd like to talk about something I saw on the XFiles, and trust me, this is directly connected to what I'm about to talk about. There was an episode of the X-Files where Mulder and Scully got sucked into this organism in the ground, and the organism slowly dissolved its prey, and they were both caught inside of it. They fought to get out, and then after a lot of struggle and fighting, they finally got outside of it, and they went back on, and they were living their lives. And then they realized that different things that they were doing, as they were going about their regular day, just didn't seem to fit, didn't seem normal. And at one point, they both looked at each other and they said, "We're still inside." And then the camera switched and it showed both of them still inside of the organism, being dissolved and being digested by it. What the organism was doing was feeding them like a kind of drug into their system that made them hallucinate and imagine that they had gotten what they desired, which was to be outside of it. And that way it stopped them from struggling. They stopped fighting, and that way it made it so that the organism could just dissolve them in peace. We celebrate Juneteenth because it's supposed to mark the day that all black people actually became free under emancipation. I submit that we are every bit as enslaved as our people were before emancipation, if not more so. I say more so because our ancestors knew they were enslaved and they actively fought against it, whereas we are enslaved and we don't realize it, and therefore we struggle against everything other than freedom because we erroneously believe that we already have it. We are not free. We are merely living under another form of enslavement. One of the few advantages of a platform like YouTube for black people is that we can go back in time and watch film clips, newsreels, and complete speeches pertaining to our people and the struggles and challenges we have always faced and had to deal with then, we deal with now, and continue to face in the United States and globally. The starkest realization one can come to when watching this material is the fact that for our people, fundamentally nothing has changed. Whether watching something about our people in the 90s, the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, and on back, the things our people are talking about and seeking to have addressed could have just as easily been spoken about yesterday. And I mean literally yesterday. For all of our marching, protesting, demanding, and being beat down by police and hunted by race soldiers, each generation seems to treat it as if it's something new, without realizing, as the saying goes, iron bars do not a prison make. In other words, we talk about the abolishment of slavery in the United States and celebrate Juneteenth as the day the final enslaved black people were freed. The problem is that just as on that episode of the X-Files where Mulder and Scully breathed a sigh of relief because they thought that they were out and they had the illusion they'd escaped the nightmare, only to have the camera switch to them still inside the organism and still very much being drained of their lives and energy. That is what has happened to our people. The celebration of Juneteenth serves as a kind of pacifier for our people. It serves as a bit of sleight of hand, which lulls us into believing that something occurred that never really happened. That thing being the true abolishment of slavery in the United States. So what's wrong with imagining that we're free? Because when we fight for equality, dignity, and recognition of our humanity, we are putting the cart before the horse. Freedom is the platform upon which all these other issues rest. Think about it. Think about the actual nature of freedom. If one is truly free and recognized as such, all these other things that we seek and fight for would be non-issues. What if you're dealing with someone you assume loves you, cares about you, and recognizes you as a full person, but you're constantly fighting with them and reminding them to treat you with honor, dignity, and respect? Then there is a problem. Love is the platform upon which honor, dignity, and respect rests. Therefore, it's not what I consider the secondary issues that need attention. It's the fundamental issue that the person actually does not love you, or else all the other things for which they're fighting would be encompassed by it, and there would be no issue. By that example, freedom of our people, true freedom, has as components within it equality, dignity, and recognition of our humanity. So by default, if you're fighting for those things, then you, by extension, don't actually have freedom yet. We've been duped into addressing side issues when the main issue, that of real freedom, has not yet been fully addressed or resolved. There are black people from that day to this who can tell you, from prisons in which they are caged for little or nothing, that through either their time on the chain gang during Jim Crow, or as sharecroppers, or those whose labor was stolen through convict leasing, or those who are imprisoned right now and presently having their bodies made into commodities by the prison industrial complex, that there is precious little difference, if any, from being on a plantation under the lash. Now, I can sense some thinking right now that those who are in jail are just criminals and they're getting what they deserve. In that case, I suggest that you read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and that book may shift your perception. Has slavery been abolished in the United States? Within a predominantly black prison system, there are men and women working for 25 cents an hour and some for less. And before your hard heart says, well, at least they're being paid something while they're in prison, answer this. Where are they spending this hard-earned pittance? At Nordstrom? Hardly. They spend their money in the prison commissary or other authorized vendors within the prison, thus placing the money right back in the hands of the prison industrial complex, which is exploiting them. Beyond that, they're used as tools, and they continue to make the super wealthy super wealthier. Here are some of the companies we do business with, and knowingly or unknowingly support the exploitation of our people in prison through slave labor, either directly or indirectly by way of independent contractors. Whole Foods, McDonald's, Target, IBM, Texas Instruments, Boeing, Intel, Walmart, Victoria's Secret, AT&T, British Petroleum, or BP, Starbucks, Microsoft, Honda Motor Company, Macy's, Sprint, Nintendo, JCPenney, Wendy's, and the list could go on. Amazon has on their promotional materials that Black Lives Matter, but they have a lucrative deal with various prisons so that they have a monopoly on the reading material that those who are incarcerated can receive. And surprise, surprise, reading materials can only be purchased and shipped through Amazon, thus giving them a monopoly, as I said, and preventing well-meaning loved ones from being able to just send books and magazines themselves to their loved ones who are incarcerated. They must come through Amazon. I submit that in celebrating Juneteenth, we are celebrating prematurely, and that our people throughout the country are still enslaved, both covertly and overtly, within the prison system. The idea of slavery is not necessarily to have physical chains around the neck or the ankle of black people, but to turn black people into a commodity, a product on which the system can profit and run. That is the slavery under which we exist presently. Are we free? Has anything actually changed for us in any significant way that means we are truly free and not enslaved and being treated as such? Prisons have and still do have very visible, tangible cages, shackles, and chains. But what of the rest of us? Those of us who, by sheer luck of the draw, are not in physical cages or bound by physical chains. We may have nice homes, cars, and jobs. Are we free because there are no scars or whips upon our back? Or is there the scar of being surrounded by 3 police cruisers and a paddy wagon just because you're walking down the street early in the morning, as happened to me a few years ago? The scars of hearing power door locks go down just because you're approaching a car. The scar of a handbag being clutched tightly because you happen to be standing in the elevator with a white woman. The scar of seeing the same male store employee happen to be every place that you are, even though you're in the feminine hygiene area. The scar of watching your people abused on a daily basis within a system that regards us as less than human. Oh, make no mistake, we do have scars across our backs. Has anything really changed, or is it just the perception, the tactics, and the tools? The police baton has replaced the whip. The taser has replaced the shotgun, and in some cases no replacement for the gun has been made at all. The hunting hounds have been replaced with police canine units. Hooded white supremacists breaking down doors to drag us out into the night have been replaced by mass SWAT teams breaking down doors with no-knock warrants and other warrants. White women getting entire cities burned down for their lies have been replaced by Beckys and Karens who have 911 on speed dial when they see black people just existing. Requests for freedom papers have been replaced by requests for proof you live in a building or complex, or being asked to prove you're permitted to access a certain pool, or having to waste your time explaining why you're in a certain neighborhood. Shackles and chains have been replaced with debt, dependence on pharmaceuticals, and materialism. Public lynchings have been replaced with lynchings via electronic media. When we are no longer a product to be bought and sold within a system, when we are no longer tethered to a system in which we have limited or no freedom of movement, then and only then will our people no longer be enslaved. And until then, the celebration of any release from enslavement is premature. It is my belief that our people can never have freedom within this construct, because at its foundation it was designed and runs and perpetuates itself upon our enslavement and oppression. The only answer for our people is separation from it, and therein lies our freedom. So, why exactly do we celebrate Juneteenth again? Thank you for listening to this edition of the Draped Maniac podcast. This is Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, that is, the head Draptomaniac in charge, saying peace to you and blessings to you and yours. And until next Friday, when we meet again here on DoayaMedia.com, I will see you on the run.
And thank you again for listening to the Draptomaniac podcast. Tune in next week at DoayaMedia.com. DOEAIAMEDIA.com. And again, we'll catch you on the run. Peace.